How are you, Jason?
I'm doing great.
Great.
I had a really good
Listen,
night last night.
yeah,
Well, we showed last
we
night at the festival.
great response.
Yeah, and I was living here in London last year while making Ghostbusters, and I fell in love
Hmm.
with the Prince Charles Theater while I was in town, and I would go to the Prince Charles any chance I could get. And my favorite thing they did there was the surprise screenings, these surprise movies where you buy a ticket, you show up, you don't know what you're going to see, and they just start playing a movie. So to be the surprise movie at the London Film Festival, it felt like complete wish fulfillment from when I was living here.
What a great surprise film. Congratulations. It made me feel so happy, your film.
Oh, I love that. Thank you.
It just, yeah, I was energized. I wanted to jump on a plane to New York. I wanted to dive
Just a
into,
dream in your eyes, and
yeah.
yeah. Um,
Yeah.
well, at the end of the day, it's funny because I don't think the movie is about Saturday Night Live. Saturday Night Live is a location. It's about people. It's about young people who make things, and in that way, I think it's relatable. Whether you've done a high school show or a talent show or anything you've ever put on, it's about what it's like to put on a show in 6 days.
What was the catalyst for you to kind of, kickstart the idea of this project of you wanting to make this film?
My writing partner Gil Kennan and I uh, just began interviewing everyone we could find that was alive that was in the building on October 11th, 1975. So that was every living writer and actor. It was Lorne Michaels, it was Rosie Schuster, people from NBC, but also all kinds of crew, people on art department, people on wardrobe, members of Billy Preston's band, literally anyone who could give us insight into what it felt like, because that's what we're trying to capture at the end of the day
Mm.
is what does it actually feel like 90 minutes before you go live?
Which you know, because you worked on the show for a little while.
I mean, I was a guest. I want to be really clear about that. That Lauren Michaels, for 1 week, allowed me to be a guest writer at Saturday Night Live, also wish fulfillment. And I got to have that experience of writing till 5 in the morning on a Tuesday night and then presenting a sketch on Wednesday. I think that's something that is really insane about that show that 50 years later, they begin on Tuesday, and by Saturday night, they present a completely new 90-minute show of
Yeah.
comedy and music. And it is that proof that anything can be done in 6 days. You just
Hmm.
have to will it. And the environment that I experienced while I was there is what I wanted to capture.
Yeah. You could have presented your interpretation of that world in so many different forms, in terms of different ways that you could have presented it in film form. And the way that you've chosen to bring us into that 90 minutes, to bring us into that energy, that kind of, that kind of life imitating art almost with this show and what goes on sort of thing. Talk me through kind of how what helped you come to that decision, but then also what that means in terms of leading up to that point where you're filming it, that preparation, how much rehearsal, choreography, all that kind of stuff goes into it.
Well, we wanted the movie to feel live, and so we even wrote it initially with the concept of could we actually do this whole movie in one shot, like in
Mm.
one take, and we would just rehearse the entire 90 minutes as one. And we abandoned that pretty early, thank God. But we never lost that ethos of that this is a continuous film. It's not a movie with 90 scenes. It's one 90-minute scene that never ends. And so we built a set that's two entire floors, and we rebuilt the entire eighth and ninth floor of Rockefeller Center, and built Eric Steelberg, our cinematographer, it designed the set with Jess Gonger, so all the lighting was built in, all the cabling was hidden. We even had mics built into the set, so the actors could literally go anywhere, the camera could go anywhere, and uh, it creates not only a sense in the movie, but a sense on set that
Mm.
we're doing this live. Uh,
Yeah.
the best example I can ever give is there was days where we had 58 mics running simultaneously. Like our sound mixer had to bring an additional mixing board so that he could manage the amount of audio that was coming in simultaneously. So the just the soundscape alone that you would hear live on the day while we were shooting was absolute chaos.
And you need that kind of cast to all be on the same page, really, with
Yeah.
regards to what you're doing. And I say cast, and obviously you've got your kind of main cast, but everybody you see on screen is cast, and everybody you see on screen has a job to do, whether that is as a comedian, whether that's as as a sound guy, whether that's his costume, even though those were actors, they had to really be able to do those jobs. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, for our background actors, which is something I've never done before, we actually did in-person casting. Yeah, and I did 2 straight days of just interviewing people, and I went home with a bunch of Polaroids, and I wrote down on each Polaroid, this will be a camera person, this will be a sound person, this will be a stage guy, and and then we had our crew teach them how to do their jobs, and then they
Mm.
worked every single day. So it became this living, breathing set where once you entered 1975 you were there with all these background actors, all our, speaking roles, all moving simultaneously, and then we would choreograph it. It's strange because the movie comes across very chaotic, but to create that chaos, you have to choreograph it like a dance movie. And the beginning of each day would be an absolute mess, and just around lunch, all of a sudden it would start to click, and
Hmm.
it just became magical. Like all of a sudden you would feel like you were actually there.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about that kind of main cast and putting those actors in those positions of those, those iconic individuals who were the start of this journey. Some that we knew better than others at the time, who was just, clearly just starting out, but they were still and also became kind of legendary. Where did you start with that? Who was your kind of first I don't know, was it kind of a case of like, okay, first casting, first piece in the jigsaw, and then it kind of working out from that? Or how did you do that?
Well, it's interesting, right? Because SNL is a generational show, and that first cast may be very well known to one segment of the population, but then
Mm.
there's going to be young people or people who didn't grow up with SNL who are less familiar with this cast. So we needed to cast actors who, yes, could emulate the people that we're seeing. So if you're a John Belushi or a Chevy Chase or a Gilda Radner or a Dan Aykroyd fan or Billy Crystal, I mean, it's kind of interesting how many people were in the room that night because like Jim
Mm.
Henson was there, and Billy Preston was there. There's all these other people. And they need to definitely speak truth to whatever your memories are of those actors. But simultaneously, if you're not familiar with any of these people, they needed to evoke the essence of those people so that you could just fall in love with them as characters. Because really, at the end of the day, this is just about a group of young people who ripped television out of the hands of another generation. And that is what we get caught up in. Not any individual, but rather this collective of young people who felt like they had never seen people who looked and felt like them on TV and said, now is our time.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think it could have, you think if someone was coming up with the idea for Saturday night or Saturday Night Live now, it would be able to happen?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, I mean, here's the interesting thing. I think, because there is sketch comedy that reflects every era, and I could probably point to like every 5 years, a new sketch comedy show comes out that just defines a generation, like
Hmm.
Key and Peele was like that. But there's something about Saturday Night Live, the way it was constructed, that it has now survived 50 years. It continually evolves, and it
Yeah.
continually reflects the tone of comedy in the world, also the taste in music. A great example is this. The opening theme song for Saturday Night Live has never been recorded in 50 years.
What?
Play it live every single week, and the band has evolved over 50 years with new band leaders, new band members, and it's an ever-changing idea. And even the way it was written with solos so that every week when you heard the opening theme to Saturday Night Live, it was actually a new theme that even if it was just changing a little bit every single week, let you know that this was a ever-growing organism.
Wow. That's awesome. I didn't know that. That's so cool. Who wrote the theme though? Who?
You know what's crazy? It's Howard Shore. Howard Shore, the composer who wrote
Yeah,
all the music for The Lord of the Rings, or like if you like thrillers, he wrote the music to Seven. Um,
he's a legend.
Howard Shore is a legend, and he is a Torontonian, just like Lorne Michaels. And it's interesting that Saturday Night Live takes place in New York, but it actually stars a lot of people from Toronto, Canada, and Chicago. And Howard Shore was a saxophonist, and is the saxophonist in the Saturday Night Live band, and was the band leader, and wrote the opening and closing themes, which are still used to this day.
Oh my God. That's just blown my little Scottish mind. That's
Yeah,
mental. I love that.
it's
That's
it's weird to
so
think of
great.
that opening theme being written by the same guy who wrote like Frodo Goes into Mordor.
Yeah. Welcome to Middle Earth.
Yeah.
Um, what I mean, music in the show and music, historically with this show, now looking back, it's such a big part, with the not just the kind of with the guests, particularly, but I'm so kind of in awe of you and John with regards to how you chose to approach the music in this particular production, in terms of, I mean, John Batiste is just an extraordinary individual. I thought um his his documentary with Leica was just phenomenal, American Symphony.
Yeah.
And it just feels like the perfect fit in terms of A, can you be in this film, but B, can you also do the music? Was this always the idea that he would do it live? Kind of talk me through how that worked, because trying to get my head around it, I was like, hold on a minute.
Uh, it was kind of a, it was just kind of a lightning in a bottle moment when we realized, oh, John could play Billy Preston, but he also could write the music for the film. And when we discussed it, I think John really grabbed onto this idea that we were trying to make the movie live in every way that we could. And, you know, it occurred to us that John had his band there playing the Billy Preston band and that they could just start riffing in real time. But I didn't realize how far it would go until we started presenting him edits of the movie live on set. And we just started recording his immediate reactions. And he would literally just point to instrumentalists and start ideas, and they became themes and they evoked emotions. And of course, we then began to edit in reaction to the music that he was creating live every day after rap. And so it becomes this circular process where he's reacting to the shooting, and then the cut is reacting to his music, which he reacts to again. And so you feel that in the music, that it's not something where a composer was sitting at a desk overnight and thoughtfully going over every eighth note, but rather someone who is in real time pointing to instrumentalists. And then John, who is touched by God as a musician, can literally just jump on anything and add anything in real time. And I think it nothing affects the flavor of the movie more than what John Batiste did.
And was that something that just kind of happened through conversation and like prep with him, or, because there's so many different ways that kind of director composer relationship materializes over productions, and you've worked across some extraordinary films, and also I'd like to take a moment just to reflect on Juno at some point before we run out in time,
Sure.
just how amazing, yeah, but yeah, was that kind of like, did you know going into filming that this was going to be how you do it? Or when did you decide on this? Because it is you don't know how it's going to work. You don't know how it's going to turn out.
The moment I was working with John Batiste was the moment I realized the music in this movie is going to be very special. And
Okay.
that the process is going to be very special because he's such a unique musician. He can write and play in any style. He also has a photographic memory for sound, which is something I've never encountered before. If he hears something once, it's locked in forever, and he can play it, and he can play any version of it. Uh,
What?
so to give you an example of that, we wanted him to play some piano over a part of the movie, and we showed him the scene once, and then he said, play it back, and he started playing back to the scene, but hitting every exact cut. And it was a scene with all kinds of unique editing. You've seen the movie. The editing is
Yeah.
strange. There's a million things happening, and he was hitting all these different beats because, again, I don't know how to describe it, but he has a photographic memory for audio, and you can name any song, and it just comes out of him, and then he can play that same song as done by Cab Calloway or Mozart. Like he just, he's genuinely touched by God.
Yeah, absolutely. And then he's in the film too, playing Billy Preston.
He's
That's
great. He's a
like,
great actor. Like he actually does a great job acting, and then he plays in it. It's funny. So in an episode of Saturday Night Live, there are two musical performances, and there's a weekend update, like a news program thing in the
yeah.
middle. And we kind of emulate that over the course of the movie. Well, a third of the way into the movie, you get a musical performance. Halfway through, you get a weekend update, and then two-thirds through, you get another musical performance.
It's but that kind of I don't know. He's just the kind of perfect choice, and it kind of, I don't know whether because he's been on the show, I think, hasn't he? He's been on Saturday Night Live in real life as John Batiste. I don't know.
I
He's
actually
also,
don't know if he's
well, he's
been.
been the band leader, hasn't he, on a talk show? So he's got
Yes,
that
he was
experience
the
of that
band
kind of
leader on
work.
Steve Colbert, but I'm not sure if he's actually been the musical guest on SNL.
Wow.
Harris did not know that. I don't think he has.
That is a travesty that needs to be rectified immediately, if that's the case, for
Attention,
sure.
Lorne Michaels.
Yeah, absolutely. What when it came to the kind of the script though, and you speaking to all these kind of, living people, both, everybody you could find for this that was part of this show. Um, but you're a writer, you're a director, and you need to have there needs to be a story, there needs to be a beginning, middle, and an end to this in terms how did you navigate kind of almost documenting the experience of everybody within the show, but also having creative license to know where you needed to either heighten things or create things, add your own little kind of fabrications, or how much did you stick to?
So everything in the movie comes from a piece of truth.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of wild things that happen in the movie, and people are always asking me, how much of it is real? They all come from threads of truth. But again, we're dealing with the contradicting memories of 30 different interviews about a day 50 years ago. And
Yeah.
and the most important thing to us, our guiding line was what it felt like to be there. What I wanted to capture is what does it feel like when you're an hour away from airtime and what you're creating has never been done before? Do you know that you're about to change culture and comedy in America, or is it just another night? And
Mm.
as the countdown begins to happen, the last 10 seconds, how hard is your heart beating? Like, where is your adrenaline? That's what we want to capture. So, in doing so, we're taking moments from the weeks leading up, the weeks after, and we're weaving them together into one night so that you can actually feel what it was like to be there.
I mean, the cast I mentioned earlier are just extraordinary. There's a couple of kind of that I wanted to pull out particularly. Rachel is just one of,
I
I
know,
think,
Rachel Sennett.
the greatest. She's just like effortlessly kind of just her timing and her delivery and her just phenomenal. That wasn't a
Rachel
question.
Sennett is, well, I just don't know another actress whose career has started with such a strong trilogy of films between Shiva Baby, Bodies, 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 and Bottoms. Um, she is such a confident, not only actress, but writer. Her voice is so unique. She is of this moment. I think she represents a generation, and she's so damn smart. Rosie Schuster, who she plays, is
Mm,
Lauren's wife and one of the head writers of the show. They had a very complicated marriage. She was sleeping with Dan Aykroyd, and it was all kind of open, and they understood it. And uh, in the same way that the television show was challenging all the kind of cultural mores, I think they were, as people, challenging social mores. And
hmm
uh, Rachel just does it with nuance and with humor and with brilliance.
yeah. Matt Wood as John Belushi is
I
so
know.
beautiful.
We're so lucky.
I when I was a teenager, I had a little tiny sort of VHS player in my bedroom with a little white portable TV, and I would go to bed every night of my life watching the Blues Brothers. Like my mum
Really?
and dad would come into my room and switch it off at various moments. It was and continues to be like I think my favorite film ever.
No kidding.
Yeah, and so it's kind of almost ingrained in my brain that entire film. And I don't know, there's something in Matt's performance that there's just a beautiful essence of John in that performance. It's
Thank you for saying so. Look, we weren't looking for impersonations. We wanted to capture the essence of each individual actor, and what Matt Wood did brilliantly as Belushi is capture that sense of dread that this is his last moment of anonymity. This is the last moment that he can really be himself. He was a star on stage and sketch comedy, and he knew that being a television star was going to change his identity.
mm,
And maybe deep down, he knew that fame and money would also be really dangerous for him and his addictions. So we find a guy who is hiding, who doesn't want to sign his contract, that Lorne Michaels is desperately trying to find, and is in the opening sketch of the show and is nowhere to be found. And Matt was able to capture the physicality of it. More importantly, it's that fear of potential, fear of success. Each one of the actors is going through something like that.
mm.
Chevy is this ego that needs to be humbled. Gilda is this overwhelming,
Oh,
well of empathy. Garrett Morris is a guy who's trying to figure out who he is in this cast. And that was the key to the performance, actually. It's not about how you walk or the sound of your voice.
Yeah.
Is the wig right? It's about, can you capture that one kernel of essence that lets the audience connect with them?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's what you've done so well, Jason, is that there is so much going on with all these characters that we really get their stories through this kind of almost playhouse that they all inhabit, and everything kind of comes through that they're all going through as well. Even like, I mean, Nicholas Braun is brilliant, double whammy. You do you know what I mean? In terms of, I
Yeah,
just watched the Jim Henson documentary actually, which is just so lovely on Disney. But as Andy Kaufman, oh my God, he's so great.
yeah,
So great. And first of all, because you see him as Kaufman first. Yeah, he's the first thing you see, isn't he? When
yeah,
Lauren's waiting for him. And then when Jim Henson rocks up, you're going, hold on, is that? Because I went in, I didn't want to know too much about everybody that was in it and all that kind of thing. So I had no idea. And then it just took me a minute going, my God, it's Nicholas as well. So I
yeah.
love the fact that he's inhabiting both these characters.
Yeah, well, we
Yeah.
wrote Jim Henson for Nicholas Braun because Gil Kennan and I would just sit there making each other laugh, imitating Nicholas Braun as Jim Henson, getting upset with the SNLers. And then Benny Safdie was actually originally going to play Andy Kaufman because Benny Safdie's a huge Kaufman fan,
Oh, wow.
just like him. And his movie got greenlit, and we lost him. So we just started trying to think of like who would be great, and we just kept on coming back to Nicholas Braun. We're like, oh, he'd be great too. And we asked, and Nicholas was up for the two roles. Fortunately,
Wow.
he never had to do both roles in one day.
Thankfully, that was really good planning. Really good planning.
There's a lot of planning on this film.
Um, what about the edit though? In terms of the prep for this was felt like it was so important. In terms of kind of everybody, that kind of weird thing almost. It feels really almost like the essence of the show of kind of there's so much planning and prep goes in, but you never quite know on the night kind of what's going to interfere or influence something as it's happening. But with the edit, how much changed or did you play with things kind of going into the edit, or was it, you talked about the music, but in terms of the show itself?
The edit became all about rhythm. We were shooting the movie in this very live way, and then the edit became about how do we capture the essence of time? How do
Hmm.
we get into Lauren's head? So there's a lot of editing where you're actually just experiencing what is going on in Lauren's head at any given time. And then most importantly, it was this relationship between the editors and John Baptiste. I think it's a very rhythmic movie, and again, not a movie with 90 scenes, but a 190-minute scene is what you're watching.
Yeah,
On any given day of shooting,
amazing.
there's no reason why you have to start or stop at any given point because everything is continuous. Everything is a hallway that leads to a room, that leads to a stairway, that leads to an elevator. There's no reason you ever need to actually stop shooting. And as a result, the editors had to find this natural rhythm for the movie because there was going to be a lot of chaos. There's going to be a lot of fast scenes, a lot of scenes where your head's on a swivel, you're trying to pick up all this information. And then the editors had to really figure out these undulating waves of calm when you just get down to two characters every once in a while and the audience gets to catch their breath. And then
Mm.
how to dial up the energy as we moved back into like hallways and things got crazy again.
It's the feel of the film as well. I think your choices of what you shot it on just kind of again they feel like a really, I mentioned Blues Brothers there and that whole especially like all those exterior scenes in that, and the color of the street lights and all that kind of stuff and that color of the NBC sign that just kind of it's just like a warm blanket that kind of envelops you as you're watching this because it's got such a beautiful feel to it for that time as well. That's an important part to it, isn't it, in terms of how it feels and looks.
Oh, 100%. We wanted this movie to feel like a document from the mid 70s, almost that you could watch it and almost think maybe they did this back then. And it's
Hmm.
why we shot on 16 millimeter, which has a kind of a level of grain that matches the 35 millimeter from the 70s. And it's why we shot it with the kind of color palette that we did. Uh, you know, this film was shot with a 16 millimeter camera on a dolly that was able to really just move anywhere in the set. Even the set was built so that the dolly could kind of get through any doorway. So the camera really just became a person. And when you start watching this movie, there's so much happening at first that it's a lot to keep track of, and it's going to feel like so many characters being introduced to you, and hopefully the experience of it is one of you, the audience member, getting settled in as you start to recognize faces and understand people's arcs, understand where they are, so that by the end you actually feel like you're part of the crew itself.
You absolutely do. You absolutely do. And I kind of I immediately sort of I spent about 3 hours online after watching the film as well, of kind of various things of watching real footage, of finding out how and if I could get tickets to Saturday Night Live to
You
go and
have to
watch
go.
a
Have you
show.
never gone to see it live?
Never got, oh, I'm so desperate to go. So desperate to go.
Oh, it's the best.
Um,
You have
that's
to.
that's moved up on my bucket list for sure.
Oh, it's
Um,
one of the great things you can experience, and what you can't imagine is how nervous you are as an audience member because you are nervous as though you are going to be the first person seen on camera, and you're just sitting in the audience.
Yeah, it's my New Year's resolution. I'm going on to sort that out as soon as possible. Before we wrap quickly, if you don't mind, just Juno, still one of my favorite films, and I mean it's nearly coming up for 20-year anniversary for that in a couple of
I
years,
can't
which is
fathom that. That's just, I don't want to think about that. The fact that Juno's baby is like can drink now is crazy.
nearly drive
Yeah.
in the States. What are your memories of that film, and particularly when you were thinking about, the music, Moldy Peaches, all that kind of stuff?
It was so interesting that we were talking about music earlier because it actually reminded me of my experience of working with Kimya Dawson and Matteo Messina on the score for that movie, which was a really interesting, is a different form of creating score where Kimya Dawson was obviously going to be the sound of that movie. And when I put her in touch with Matteo Messina, this composer, she was bringing her instrumentals in and she was humming her own songs, and then he was composing music around them, and that really defined the sound and feel of that movie. um, and I guess I'm realizing that that really is my way into a movie, is understanding what it sounds like. And each of my experiences with composers have been like that, is identifying songs that really identify a mood.
Mm.
And Kimmy is obviously, she's just an angel, and she has such a specific voice. But I think when people think of that movie, they think of the sound of her voice.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. Uh, yeah, and that performance in the film as well. It's just really,
Yeah,
is.
well, it was a movie of discovery. You
Mm.
know, it was the discovery of Elliot Page, and it was the discovery of Diablo Cody, and the discovery for a lot of people of Moldy Peaches and Kimya Dawson, and for some people, even just like different sides of Jason Bateman and Jen Garner and Mike
Yeah.
Cera, a different side of J.K. Simmons or Allison Janney, and obviously really gave birth to my career. So I think for all of us, it felt like an arrival and an
Yeah.
introduction, and in a weird way, a birth.
I think we need to plan a big 20th birthday celebration somewhere, somehow, with some live
Absolutely.
music involved.
I'm down.
And that would
Count me in.
be
Prince Charles Theater.
yes.
Now we're talking.
Oh my God. Genuinely actually going to get in touch with them and see if we can sort that out.
So
Um, do you just last before we finish then, just talking about music being that kind of in point for a lot of it, do you have music around when you're writing then? Does music help kind of inspire when you're sitting down, even putting the kind of foundations together for something?
yeah, I have a playlist for every movie that I write, and I find that on the mornings where I'm not in the mood to write, or when I feel like I can't figure out where I am in the movie, I put on the music and I'm there. If I can
Mm.
hear the movie, then I can write the movie.
And what's informing the choices of what you put on that playlist?
Oh my God. I feel like trying to answer that is trying to answer like why you fall in love with somebody. I feel like
Yeah.
it's so instinctual. And um, you can kind of intellectualize what a film means and how it's constructed, but and maybe I just don't have the language for it. But for me, music simply makes me feel. And I have a very perverse problem, which is I don't listen to the lyrics of anything. I don't know the lyrics of any song. I just know how they make me feel. The music
Yeah.
makes me feel something, and I go on my own journey and I take it where I want to go. And so as a result, I miss out on a lot of poetry, but the music makes me dream in movies.
Yeah. I think I know one line from one song. It's a song by The National, which is like the line where it goes, you know, I dreamed about you for 29 years before I met you. That's the only line I ever
That's a
quote from
great line.
anyone. But I absolutely hear you on that one as well.
I love,
I'm gonna
you know the song 88 Lines About 44 Women?
no.
Seven Dales. That's a killer. And
Okay.
that's why
Going in for that after.
88 lines about 44 women. I think you're gonna love. It's so good.
There we go. That's my recommendation after this. Thank you so much, Jason. It's so great to chat to you and huge congratulations. You have just captured something really quite special, you know, in terms of yeah, how this beast started and continues to be for me one of my kind of favorite things that I even over here, you know, we don't get it over here, but it's still it travels and it's something that we kind of seek out for sure. So thanks for your time and huge congratulations.
Oh, that was a pleasure. Lovely talking to you.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.